my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. Luo Xujin. And Dr. Luo is a principal investigator at the School of Life Sciences at Peking University in China, a conservation and evolutionary geneticist with a PhD from the University of Minnesota and a postdoc at the National Cancer Institute in Maryland. Dr. Luo is leading an active research team working on the genetics of wild and domestic cats, and is the lead author discovering the new Malayan tiger subspecies, Panthera tigris jacksoni, finding the genetic causes of the white tiger and elucidating the evolutionary histories of various endangered felids, including the tiger, leopard cat, and the Chinese mountain cat. Dr. Luo has been a member of the IUCN Cat Specialist Group since 2005 and a council member for the American Genetic Association since 2020. Now that's Dr. Luo's official biography, but I'd like to add that Dr. Luo is one of a new generation of fantastic Chinese scientists working in one of the world's mega biodiverse countries. And what an exciting time as modern tools are opening up a new era of discovery in a country where there's still so much to learn and so many species remain poorly known. I've had the pleasure of accompanying Dr. Luo and her team in the field to research another small cat, the leopard cat, in Beijing. And I can say that Dr. Luo is not only an excellent scientist, but also a great communicator. So it is with great pleasure and some excitement that I introduced not only a great scientist, but also a friend, Dr. Luo Xujin, to tell us about the secretive Chinese mountain cat. So over to you, Dr. Luo.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, the Snow Leopard Network. It's such a great pleasure to be here and share some of our work on the smaller cat. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see me okay? Okay. Yes. So this is the main role of today's talk, the Chinese mountain cat. I especially like this picture because of the blue eyes. Yeah, so Terry already gave a great introduction. Thank you so much for your compliment. It has been a long way that I came from a biochemistry and molecular biology and genetics background and start utilizing what I'm good at into wildlife conservation. And most of my friends and colleagues know me for the one who works on tiger. And it happens that our publication on tigers has been lasting for over 20 years now. And I'm very glad that now we are putting the list some of the smaller cats. So since our work spanning about cats, so I would like to give a brief introduction about the cat family, the family of Felidae. So this is a very simplified tree of the evolution of Felidae. It starts from the common ancestor of all cats about 30 million years ago. But many cats gone extinct and didn't last until today, including the saber-toothed cats. So many people may think that saber-toothed cat is a modern cat's ancestor, which is not true. They are locating on a different branch of modern cats of the cat tree. So it's essentially a cousin of about 11 million years ago. So this is a very recent radiation when we consider a group of megafauna. So some other animal groups have a much older history, but not the cat. So there are now currently about 40 species of cat species, the modern cats. So they share about a common ancestor about 10 million years ago and can be classified into 8 lineages. So 8 branches on the tree. So the earliest lineage is the Panthera lineage, and then followed by a bay cat lineage and the African caracal lineage, and the one in the American Ocelot lineage. Lynx, puma, back to our Asia, leopard cat, and the domestic cat lineage. So 8 lineage, 40 species. That consists all of our modern cats. So where other cats are today? They're in Europe, Asia, African, South American, North American, essentially everywhere except Australia and Antarctica. So essentially the world is about cats, and every ecosystem in terrestrial ecosystem, there's a cat sitting on top of the food chain. So that's why joke within our IUCN cat specialist group, if you are an animal in the world, or at least in the land and terrestrial world, you are either a cat or you are either a cat food. So that speaks of how important cats are to the ecosystem globally. So let's take a closer look on the A lineages of cats. So this is the first lineage, the Panthera lineages, lion, tiger, and of course, snow leopard that everyone here love. And also the leopard and jaguar and cloudy leopard, because cloudy leopard divided into 2 species. So that's why now we have 7 bay cats instead of 6. The bay cat lineages are mid-sized cats living in Southeast Asia, and also the Asiatic golden cat also live in China, and also the marble cats too. The caracal lineage, look at the slender body shape and the long ears. So apparently it's a safari cat, and that's where they live in the sub-Sahara African safari land. The ocelot is different. They are all a group of small cats and living in a tropical area and have a common ancestor and radiate into South American and Central American, and divergent into 7 or 8 different species. Lynx are mid-sized cats, including 4 bobtail, short-tail, tough ear cats, including in Eurasia, Canada, US, bobcat, and the Iberian lynx in Europe. The puma lineage, including 3 cats that looks very distinctly related, the cheetah, puma, and jaguarundi. So these are not the big cats, they are the mid-sized cat we usually call. Now back to our leopard cat lineage, that's including, this is a lineage living in Asia, and especially in China. We have leopard cat and Felis cat. And in Southeast Asia, there's a rusty-spotted cat, flat-headed cat, and a fishing cat. By the way, fishing cat is actually my favorite cat because of so cool. Like when we think of a cat doesn't like water, and this is a cat actually live in water and prey in water. So the last, most recent lineages is domestic cat lineage. The sand cat, jungle cat, and black-footed cat are the distantly related Felis species, and the domestic cat, wildcat, and Chinese mountain cats are with different taxonomy classifications. Sometimes they are included as a subspecies, and some are distinct species. So when we talk about wildcat here in today's talk, we mean Felis silvestris. So the studies by my colleagues Carlos Driscoll in 2007 in Science stated that there should be all wildcat lineage should be considered subspecies of the wildcat, including the European wildcat, African wildcat, South African wildcat, and the Asiatic wildcat, and the Chinese mountain cat in China. So the domestic cat actually originated from the African wildcat, Felis silvestris lybica, in Near East or Egypt about 10,000 years ago. So that's the study about cats domestication. Where are the cats from? So the study in 2007 by my colleagues Carlos Driscoll first give a genetic study about the domestic cat origin from Near East, from the African wildcat. And then another study in 2017 also puts the cat domestication center in Near East or somewhere in Egypt, but anyway, it's in around that area. So all the study did not have sample from East Asia. So that still leave a gap about the cat domestications in the world. So when we talk about domestic versus wild animals, one obvious feature we will see that individuals from the same species often share an overall uniform coat color and patterns. And usually the variation within the species are very uncommon. So very uncommonly, we will see black jaguar, white tiger, or white lion, but we are all consider they are rare variants. However, when the domestication process started, the natural selections pressure release, and that becomes all different kind of phenotypes, all different kind of characters that may leave a wild animal that cannot survive in the wild, but can still safely survive in our human society. So domestic cat is one of the most popular pets in the world. Now the Cat Fancier Association recognized about 50 breeds around that. So this is much less than the dog. There are estimated about 6 million cats in the world. Dog, I think, is a little bit over that, about 900 million. So about around that. So the cat person and the dog person always argue who is the most favorite pet, but of course we think it's a cat. So among the 600 million cats, among 100 million are feral cats. They live in free ranging, and their conservation impact is a great debate in the community. So when it comes to the domestic cat in China, so there has been archaeological evidence for cat-human association in the Shanxi Yangshao cultural archaeological site. That's about almost 6,000 years ago. So there are already some cat bones remains excavated, but it turned out that those cats are not domestic cats, but they are leopard cats. So in literature, the Shijin, the book of songs, record the character Mao, which means cat in Chinese, about 3,000 years ago. So, but nobody knows whether they are wild or domestic cat. So the earliest origins of cats, only a hypothesis, because that's a study that our lab is still working on to look at the origin of domestic cat in China. So before this study, so people tend to think that in Han Dynasty, about 2,000 years ago, is where the cats finally arrive in China from Near East, go through Asia, through a way that we don't know yet, and to arrive in China. And there are some breeds in China, like the Chinese Lihua cat and the Shandong lion cat, the big white cat. They are all Chinese local breed. So, but essentially, the genetic ancestry of domestic cats of China remained unknown before our study, because there are all this hybridization in Felidae, so commonly observed in various lineages, among the Panthero lineages, among the South American smaller cat lineages, and also in Europe, there's all this hybridization between domestic cat and European wildcat study going on. So that leads a natural thought that whether there's a hybridization between domestic cat and wild cats in China, and how that may impact the origins of domestication cats in China. So that all goes into how we started the study. So when we speak of wild cats in China, we are talking about two taxa. One is the Asiatic wildcat, now classified as a subspecies of wildcat, and it distributes in Central Asia all the way to Xinjiang, Gansu, and Inner Mongolia of China. And that's the interesting thing, is that it's only spotted wildcat lineages among all Felis silvestris. And then is our major role, the Chinese mountain cat. It's endemic to the eastern part of the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau, and it has name of Chinese desert cat, or steppe cat, or Chinese mountain cats. And we think that the Chinese mountain cat reflects its habitat and ecosystems more appropriately. So there's a great controversy in taxonomy. We first pronounced a unique species in 1892. And then think of its close association with other Felis silvestris was announced as a subspecies. And then the other biogeography study declared that it should still be considered a species. So it's it's ongoing debate that when we started the project. Okay, speak more about the the Chinese mountain cat. So on the right is the distribution map that we are just generated. It's based on a county level distribution of the Chinese mountain cat, very restricted range and only restricted to the eastern part of the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau. And the most significant morphology is the sand color fur with a very faint dark stripe and the thick tail, ear tuft. But to me, it's the most unique part is the light blue pupils, the iris, the blue eyes. Although many snow leopard are painted as a blue eye, but according to my observation and my friends and colleagues' observation, we kind of think, we agree that the snow leopard's iris is not blue, but the wild purebred Chinese mountain cat really has a blue eye. So that comes to the title of my talk today. So two major questions we want to answer is that the local wildcat contribute to cat domestication in China. And the second question is whether the Chinese mountain cat is an independent species or a subspecies of the wildcats. So we want to use the whole genome, the information to elucidate these issues. So to accomplish these issues, we need to gather the authentic purebred samples from all the taxons involved. So this study starts about 5 or 6 years ago. So we were able to gather around almost 300 samples, including 240 domestic cat, 27 Chinese mountain cat, and 1 Asiatic wildcat. And for the domestic cat sample, we especially focus on whether it's located in the Chinese mountain cat core area or marginal area or outside the Felis bieti area. So together, we use all the genetics tools to sequence the mitochondrial sequence Y chromosome and the whole genome, the sequencing. And that's how we gather our samples. For domestic cat, we use a buccal swab and collect for those cats that really look like local cats, not the breed, American short hair, like those are not the cats we are interested in, but the really local Chinese domestic cat. And together we also gather the Chinese mountain cat from roadkill, from the museum specimen, zoo animals, everywhere we try to go. And this is Dr. Yu He, the students back then carrying out the project. So we are able to travel to some of the most beautiful places in the world for the project. And here is after many of the tedious lab work, I'm only going to show the results here. So all those cats are color coded. So you see this. So this is a phylogenetic tree. You can see all the Chinese mountain cat are coded blue, and all the Asiatic wildcat are coded red, and the outgroup black-footed cat are coded in orange. And so first thing we see is that all the Chinese domestic cat and the worldwide domestic cat, they form a cluster and a cluster within the African wildcat. So the Chinese domestic cat did not show a dramatic difference with other worldwide domestic cat. And the second point is that the Chinese mountain cat and the Asiatic wildcat, they all form a different unique lineage, but within the wildcat lineages. Also, we detect some introgression within the samples. For example, 4 out of the 11 Chinese mountain cat actually carry a Asiatic wildcat mitochondrial haplotype. That shows that it has a maternal lineage ancestral from the Asiatic wildcat. And also we detect 3 domestic cats actually carry a Chinese mountain cat Y chromosome, which means the paternal, the father's lines are actually from a Chinese mountain cat. And these 3 cats are from the Tibetan region. So when we look at the autosome, like a more broad, deep look on the genome-wide view of the evolution of the cat, again, we see that all domestic cats cluster into one clade with the African wildcat. That means that the Chinese domestic cat also share the same origin with other domestic cat in the world. And the second conclusion is that, again, the Chinese mountain cat and the Asiatic wildcat, they are genetically equidistant. So they should be considered as both wildcat subspecies, because Asiatic wildcat are still considered a subspecies. To follow the taxonomy principle, we should also recognize Felis bieti as also a wildcat subspecies. So that's the logic why we argue that the Chinese mountain cat should be a subspecies of a wildcat. So again, some other analysis I'm going to skip quickly. So this is a Pca analysis showing the same pattern, and the population admixture analysis. And here, each column represents one cat. So when it has a uniform color, which means it has a very pure genetics background. So all the blue are Chinese mountain cat, and all the grays are domestic cat, and the green are also domestic cat. And we see there are some domestic cat actually share some Chinese mountain cat genetics ancestry. We can see that from this blue gray bar with some blue component. So these are something that we're getting more interesting in look at whether there's a genetics introgression from Chinese mountain cat to the sympatric wild domestic cats are significant and or widespread. And actually it turned out to be the case. So when we look at the Sichuan, Qinghai bordering area, where is the Chinese mountain cat core distribution, and when we collect the sympatric domestic cat, as shown in the picture here, they actually carry about 5 to 10% of the Chinese mountain cat ancestry, even though they don't look like a Chinese mountain cat at all. Look at this orange cat, like actually carry 10% of the Chinese mountain cat genes. When we move to Qinghai Gansu border, which is already on the marginal range of bieti, the components from Chinese mountain cat in the domestic cat actually much reduced, only 1 to 5%, but at least it's still some signature. When we move beyond the bieti range, when we collect the cat, domestic cat samples, and we detect no genetics components from any of the wildcat, that again shows that there's no genetics contribution to overall the domestic cat origins in China. So the admixture is ongoing and current, not in the past. So we calculate the time when this Chinese mountain cats introgress into domestic cats happen. And it's turned out to be between 15 years to 70 years ago, so very recent. And this 70 years actually coincided with the development in the Tibetan region, the socio-economic development in Tibetan region, and that may likely bring the domestic cats into the plateau, and that when they encounter the Chinese mountain cats population, it gets received the genetics admixture signals from the Chinese mountain cat. So we look at the history, evolutionary history. Again, so the key point here is that, I'm going to skip this. So the key point here is that the African wildcat, Chinese mountain cat, and Asiatic wildcats, they already have a divergence of over 1 million years ago. And there's a multiple gene flow between the taxa. So we detect from domestic cats to Asiatic wildcat. We also detect Asiatic wildcat to Chinese mountain cat. We also detect the ancestral of the wildcats into the domestic cat. And also to a conservation issue that we are most concerned of is whether there's an introgression from domestic cat to Chinese mountain cat. And this signal is there, but it's not that strong yet. So, and the remaining work is that, the title is to Tracing the Blue Eyes of the Chinese mountain cat. And that's exactly ongoing now by other PhD candidate students in our lab who is trying to look through the high altitude adaptation and whether the natural selection leads to the blue eyes in the Chinese mountain cat. So one of the hypotheses is that it may be a selection of the sand color coat, which gives the cats a very good camouflage and survival. And the blue iris is actually a byproduct as the reduction of the melanin. It's a body wide, so it may lead to the blue iris, but that's a hypothesis that we are still working on in the lab. So to give a summary of this work is that the Chinese mountain cat should be recognized as the same taxonomic units with the other wildcat. So because other wildcats are subspecies, so that's why we also need to be consistently to keep Felis silvestris bieti, the Chinese mountain cat, as a subspecies of wildcat. Or the other way is that we elevate all into distinct species, but that will involve the studies of other wildcats. So that's beyond the current study scope. So we also find out instead of multiple origins, there's only a single origins of domestic cats in China. It all come from African wildcat, get domesticated, and then the domestic cat travel to China. And very lately, it get into the plateau, and there it encountered the Chinese mountain cat and become and have the genetic admixture and introgression between the two. So we are really concerned that whether the domestic cat, increasing domestic cat population will bring the hybridization issues to the local wildcat and whether it will disrupt the wildcat genetics integrity. So that will be an issue with profound conservation implication. And that's also a project and the following issue questions that we are working on in the lab right now. So this study published last year, and we reviewed so two things: the domestic cats in China's origins and evolutionary ancestry of the Chinese mountain cat. So, and these are pictures of a domestic cat from Qinghai with the Chinese mountain cat admixture, and these two cats they look like just a domestic cat, but they actually carry a Chinese mountain cat Y chromosome. And this is a cat right now live in my home now. And when you look at they look very different, but we are really concerned that whether if the genetics introgression will actually bring a threat to the local Chinese mountain cat population. That's an issue that we can discuss following. So I want to talk about, besides the big cats, there are 12 wild Felis in China, and we talk about the Chinese mountain cat and Asiatic Wildcat briefly. And also now I would like to use a few minutes to introduce another project of us just right now in Beijing on the Leopard Cat. Okay, there's a Bengal cat, a domestic cat breed. Also in China, sometimes it will be called Baomao, the leopard cat, but actually this is a house cat. It's a breed of a domestic cat. Many generations ago, it has the genetic admixture from leopard cat, but it's already a fixed true breed. When we talk about leopard cat here, it's a wild, completely wild cat, has no domesticate and no tame, and it's completely wild. So since 2018, we launched projects on the molecular and behavior ecology of wild leopard cats around Beijing. The reason is that we want to look at the mechanism of human-wildlife coexistence in contemporary China. And it begins with a very interesting encounter that I picked a scat during hiking, and we did a genetics test and turned out to be a leopard cat. And the site where I picked the scat is very close to a cabin that I have in outside Beijing. So I have a very interesting, can how can a wild domestic leopard cat can live so closely to human residents? How did that happen? And is there a hidden world of wildcats in Beijing? So that's how we started the project, doing many of the weekend trips, and good that it's only a day trip. So we set up camera, pick up genetics samples as much as we can, and we change the cameras and then look at the modify the location. So you start with a side project because we don't know how many of the cats are, whether we can collect enough data to be a meaningful project. So it starts from a very casual project, but actually it turned out very interesting. All the pictures are from our camera. So first we discovered that there's a big 10 mid-sized mammals. There's no large animals, large carnivores. Tigers are gone, leopards are gone, but we have all these 10 mid-sized mammalian species in Beijing. So including 3 ungulate and all these other carnivores species. And the relative abundance index of the leopard cat in our camera trapping data is extremely high. It reached 14%. And this is definitely the highest records among all the locations in China with the camera trapping monitoring site. And then, and it was later that we discovered our study size actually right across the valley from the Beijing Winter Olympic alpine ski slope. So from behind, you can see the construction under construction, the slope of the alpine ski course. And we got the pictures with you can see the light on the route. So that immediately reminded me of these famous puma pictures striding across the ridge with the Hollywood side in the background. So immediately that reminded me that in Beijing, we can also have not as big as a puma, but we have a leopard cat and all other amazing species right living in the neighborhood. So that's really an exciting the side projects that it extended to. So with this chance, I even become a technical officer of the Beijing Winter Olympics and have the honor to participate and attend the full course of the Winter Olympics and right at the alpine ski venue. So at that time, we already published a letter on Science, the Hidden Olympic Spectator, published the picture and talk about the story about how the wildlife neighbors are also observing the human activities with us. And so with the chance that I was attending the Winter Olympics, I bring this printout and have 81 the Winter Olympics delegation team and sign their name on it. So it's a very amazing experience that I can share with everyone, and also the story that we are able to find out how amazing we have a landscape and nature here. And even more amazing that by the time I already live in the Olympic bubbles, our camera from the other side of the ridge still continue to monitor the animals. So we can see the leopard cat, the wild boar, all passing by the background where the Olympic is going on in January 27 and January 18. So even more amazing is that the leopard cat not even observing the Olympics from the other side of the valley, but they all actually enter. They live right on site, and one cat even passed by the award ceremony rehearsal on January 31st. So, and then another photographer, journalist, with a camera and take pictures of the leopard cat right on the track. You can see where it take the pictures. So actually, during the Winter Olympics time, there's actually 4 sightings right on the site of the alpine ski routes. So some are very high and some are in the lower, but all beyond the 1,400 meters. So we are very relieved and very exciting, also very surprised to see that the secretive leopard cat can actually really show some certain extent of adaptation and can live in a certain way on a human dominant landscape. So I didn't show the data here because this is still ongoing, but the overall conclusion so far is that the species diversity is high, although we don't have large carnivores. And the leopard cat abundance is high. I didn't show that. We actually use a DNA test and to show that there's at least 20 different cats utilizing this 15 kilometers trail. So this is amazing, surprisingly high density that beyond our expectation. And the anthropogenic disturbance are primarily from city hikers who actually show up less than 40% of the time. And so there's no hunter, logger, collector, builder was observed. So when we think of Beijing as a metropolitan city, there's also other type of a human disturbance that is being reduced or eliminated. So that actually gives us some hope. And also we did some meta-barcoding diet analysis to show that the leopard cats living in the mountain and the leopard cat live in the wetland, they actually eat differently and they have a different menu. And so that's all interesting story that I hope that I have a chance to share with you in the future. So the overall, so this project really gives us a hope. It could be possible to maintain the balance between the wilderness and human settlements, even around Beijing. As far as the relative intact habitat could be preserved on a landscape scale and keep the disturbance minimized. So some wildlife who are adaptive enough may be resilient enough to survive and coexist. So that's a conclusion, a temporary conclusion, midterm conclusion that we got from the project, and this project is still going on, and hopefully we'll bring a more exciting story to you. So with this, I really want to thank Peking University and the Center for Life Sciences and our university and all the foundation to support our research team. And I only show the fieldwork part and the results of many students and us are working in the lab diligently to bring up the story to bring the story here. And also how interesting work bring the work together. I want to show the pictures where Terry joined one of our field trip and Justin joined our first field trip in Beijing. And many years ago, I was in Nepal tracking tigers, riding on an elephant. And here, these are pictures I really want to show that when I was doing my PhD from University of Minnesota, it turned out that our program received many students from Asia, and then many of them are now also back to their home country and working on the amazing work on the different biodiversity from Thailand, Philippines, and Mongolia. So I know Puji many years ago. And I also thank also here are Dave Smith from Minnesota and Stephen O'Brien from Maryland. So they equipped me with the conservation and the scientific skills that I'm enjoying so much, and I'm working with my students and colleagues, and we will try to make some change or make some more understanding of the nature that we are living on. So with that, I will conclude my talk, and I would like to continue our conversation and discussion. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Luo. I mean, wow, so many highlights in that presentation. I think the whole story about the genetic history of the Chinese mountain cat is really fascinating. And I think there are already a few questions in the chat box to come. And also, I think the story about the Beijing leopard cats, I think, is such a fantastic story of these cats appearing alongside, one of the biggest international sporting events that there is, and sort of what that means in terms of hope for people and wildlife to coexist. I think there are so many questions and great points of discussion that we can build on from your lecture. So thank you once again for that really fantastic presentation. But to kick us off, before I get to the questions, I'd like to introduce our discussant for today, who is also a small cat expert. So Mr. Ganga Ram Regmi, who is actually originally a primate researcher and received an MSc in primate conservation from Oxford. And although he was interested earlier in primates, he later became interested in research and conservation of wild cats, and particularly high altitude wildlife in the Himalayas. He's founder and director of the Nepal-based conservation NGO Third Pole Conservancy, regional director of the Small Wildcat Conservation Foundation, coordinator of the Manul or Pallas's Cat Working Group for the Himalayan region, and many other posts. But for the sake of time, I won't read out the full list. Needless to say, he's a very busy man working on small cats. So I'm very honored to invite Ganga to offer some reflections and a response to Dr. Lua's great presentation. So over to you, Ganga.
Thank you. Very interesting talk, Dr. Lu. Thank you so much. We learned so many things about Chinese mountain cat and also leopard cat. So apart from the possible hybridization, what might be the other threats in its natural habitat for Chinese mountain cat? So I have a question for you. And we have lots of questions from other participants as well.
Yeah, so you are asking about the hybridization issues?
I am asking about the other threats for Chinese mountain cat in its natural habitat.
Threats. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
threats.
Yeah.
So before, people think that they could be very rare, and later with in the past 10 years, with more efforts of surveillance, it becomes more common. But actually, it could be just more monitoring and more attention. So it still thinks that the threats to the cats are primarily the habitat issue, and with the infrastructure's capacity building, there could be more roadkills. And so over everything about the cat's survival or wildlife survival is always habitat. So hunting, there used to be some pelt trade, but now at least it's illegal and it's not a massive scale. So, but it could be still on the opportunistic hybridization, because right now our work primarily detect one way from Chinese mountain cat to domestic cat, one way hybridization. The other way around, I think it's about the balance. When one population is over dominant over the other one, it becomes, so now, because the domestic cat is still a new arrival to the plateau, consider evolutionary scale. So it's still a small population with a relatively strong hold of Chinese mountain cat. So from mountain cat to domestic cat, this way of hybridization is more profound. So whether the domestic cat will become a threat to the Chinese mountain cat through hybridization. So that's this ongoing projects that we are trying to collect as many as possible, the morphologically authentic Chinese mountain cat, and see if there is Chinese domestic cat genes in this mountain cat. So that's to prove something, we still need more evidence. So that's my view. Terry, you've been to Tibet and Qinghai, so you have seen a real mountain cat, and I haven't seen any. So what's your thought about the conservation threat to this cat?
Yeah, well, I'm far from an expert on Chinese mountain cat, but I was very fortunate to see a mother with some kittens at a den a few years ago in Qinghai, and certainly the local people there in that area said that they were hybridizing with domestic cats, because a lot of the local herder families these days do have domestic cats, right, to help control rodent populations around their dwelling. So I think it's increasingly the case that these domestic cats come into contact with wild Chinese mountain cats. So I suspect that will become a bigger problem going forward. I'm not sure whether climate change would also be a threat in terms of changes to the habitat. If there are changes in the prey availability linked to changes in habitat, linked to climate change, that may also be an issue. But yeah, difficult to say, I think. But there is a question in the box, by the way, from Peter Roy, who is also extremely lucky to have seen a Chinese mountain cat in Sichuan, and I think he has a question about population. So maybe if Peter is here, maybe he could unmute himself and put his question to Dr. Luo.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, I just wanted to ask how many Chinese mountain cats are estimated to be in the wild currently, and how do we know accurately? Because as I understand it, it's very difficult to know how many there are or to actually see them.
Yes, so as I said, we are just updating the IUCN red list of the Chinese mountain cat. We have several conference call about the population size estimate. So we come up with no more than 10,000. That's a very rough estimate. It's very difficult to do an accurate density estimate or population size estimate. So not even to snow leopard with all the attention and studies. So it's still hard to get the estimate of the actual number. So right now there's no such scale studies going on the Chinese mountain cat. So we can only think of the restricted range and distribution and the possible density and do a very rough estimate. And so that puts the number definitely less than 10,000. But what's the lower range? I cannot say. Yeah. So
it's really hard to estimate the population of small cats in compared to big cats.
Well, big cats are not easy either. So, when it comes to population size estimate, it's always not an easy task, I think.
I think we have some other questions. So let's go to another one. We've got one question here from Justine, actually, about disease. Could disease be a threat to Chinese mountain cats coming from domestic cats? So if there's more interaction, could they bring diseases that are potentially lethal for Chinese mountain cats?
Yeah, so we definitely need more study. And so I would encourage, if anyone, not only to the Chinese mountain cat, but if any study going on the plateau, Felis cat, Chinese mountain cat, or any other canine, any study involving anesthetize the animal and putting radio color, draw the blood, make an examination, the physical health exam, and to see whether there's a prevalence of common disease, parasites, pathogen. So in Beijing, when we captured leopard cat and put the satellite collars, we also draw blood and then do take the samples and then to do the common pathogen screening. So we can to know about whether there's a transmission between whether the leopard cats will share the common cat pathogens, and so that has to review a lot of information that we were not able to know before. So, for example, when the cat, a wild leopard cat, a healthy young one, so to be able to survive in the field, so it has to be healthy and strong. So it's very clean, and all the 7 pathogens commonly seen in domestic cat we don't observe in the leopard cats in Beijing. So that's okay. That's only two animals. So but with the accumulation of information, we'll be able to explore more and more into this issue. But that's definitely a very important issue. When we think of wildlife and conservation, the health issue is a very important part.
Yeah. And we've got another question here about, are there natural predators for the Chinese mountain cat in your study area?
No, all cats are top predators. A tiger will not eat the leopard cat. A leopard will not eat the Chinese mountain cat. So they're all on the top of their food trained. So
but
they
I remember,
may be competitor. Yeah. So yeah.
I remember where the active den was. I know that one of those cats was killed by dogs sometime later. So I think domestic dogs, on the Tibetan Plateau, you have those quite intimidating and ferocious mastiffs. They'll take on big predators, right? And I think there have definitely been cases where they have killed Chinese mountain cats and probably other small cats as well. I don't know if you or Ganga know anything about
that. We do not have any proof for this, but people say that especially dogs kill the small cats, and also some large animals like blue sheep and marmot. But for cat, I haven't seen any event, or I haven't heard about that. As Dr. Lu said, all cats are in the top in their food chain and ecosystem. So, but it might be possible. There might be cannibalism. Yeah.
Yeah, so the dogs issues are also with great concern, even in Beijing. So our cameras also photograph troops of feral dogs running across the trail. So for feral cats, they are no more than 5 kilometers away from the residence. But the dogs, they go everywhere, go all the deep into the mountain, and we don't know what they are doing, just running from one end to the other end. So we are concerned about their impacts on the ecosystem. So, but we are still trying to figure out design a project whether we can further explore this issue. Yeah, to evaluate the impact of something to another thing is not easy. To see their presence and versus to evaluate their impacts are two different issues, and require a lot of thoughtful project design. So but that's definitely an issue that all the feral dogs, they are horrible.
Yeah, I know that the Chinese mountain cat is not to be messed with. I mean, I've seen video footage from the camera traps of them chasing away Tibetan foxes. You would think Tibetan foxes might be a threat. They're big, and they're a predator, but the mountain cat easily scares them away. The Tibetan fox seems to be very scared of the mountain cat in the footage that I've seen. So they can look after themselves, I think.
Yeah, all cats, they are very sensitive. So I think habitat and disturbance are still the major threats and impacts to their survival.
We have another question here from Utsav. I don't know if Utsav is still here. If maybe we could ask Utsav to unmute himself or herself, I'm not sure, and ask the question directly. Utsav, are you able to unmute yourself? Maybe I can read the question in that case, because it's in the chat box. So Utsav says, with wide distribution of leopard cats throughout Asia, do you think there are more cases of genetic introgression among leopard cat and domestic cat?
The domestic cat, could you?
Yeah, so with wide distribution of leopard cats throughout Asia, do you think there are chances of more cases of genetic introgression?
Oh, leopard cat and domestic cat. They're different genus. Leopard cats are Lurus and domestic cat are Felis. So we are more concerned about the domestic cat and the Chinese mountain cat because essentially they all belong to the same species, Felis silvestris. But leopard cats are belonging to different genus. So in the breeding exercise tells us that the leopard cat and the domestic cat has a strong reproductive barrier. So the male F1, the hybrid male first generations are infertile. So there's a strong barriers between their reproduction and hybrid. So that's not an issue that we are concerned about. But the Chinese mountain cat and the domestic cat, they have no reproductive barrier. So they encounter and they can mate. So whether they want it or not, that's a different issue. So I see Justin mentioned about that a question earlier on that, of course, it will be a male mountain cat mate with a female domestic cat. It's hard to imagine it's another way around. So that's why. So we often see a domestic cat has a mountain cat Y chromosome. That means that the father side is from the mountain cat.
Yeah. There's another question here from Uva about, or maybe I can ask Uva to unmute and ask the question directly about competition. Or maybe we're having a problem with unmuting. So I'll read out the question again. So can I ask if domestic cats compete with Chinese mountain cats for prey?
For prey? Yeah. So that's a question that can be addressed by diet analysis through the scat. So if we they located in the same area, so through the scat analysis of their diet, we can tell their menu and their diet. So that's a project that it's feasible, but we haven't done that.
Yeah, I guess it seems likely, right? Because they're similar size and would go for similar prey. But, yeah.
So in Beijing, when we collect the scat and it turned out to be a domestic cat, we also do the analysis and show. And it's always the preliminary conclusion is that the domestic cat, whether it's a completely free-ranging feral cat, they always have some human-related food in their diet compared to leopard cat. So they're still associated with the household and human residence fish in the mountain. So definitely it's from trash or something. Yeah.
That makes sense. And then Zalmai, I don't know if Zalmai is with us, whether they're able to unmute themselves. Question. Good question about potential threat.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. For the great presentation. It was very informative, and I learned a lot about these small cats. It was very interesting. So my question was that, okay, hey, you guys talked about the natural predator, and you said it's on the top of the like chain. I was thinking of maybe like birds of prey preying on small cats and stuff. Is it possible? Or what do you think in that?
Ganga, can you talk about your field site?
In my study area of Felis cat, there is a mountain hawk eagle which is very strong, and it might kill Felis cat, but we don't have any event, but it might be possible.
I think in Mongolia, oh, sorry, Zalmai, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank Ganga for the answer. Yeah, thanks.
Yes,
yeah, I think for the kitten, kitten, they may be subject to all the threats from raptors and from other carnivores. When we talk about, when we make our proud statement that the cat stays on the top of the food chain, so it means the adult are strong. When you're getting weak and young, so you're exposed to all different threats.
I think there was a case of a Felis cat kitten being, or at least strongly suspected of being taken by a bird of prey in Mongolia on the plains. I'm not sure which raptor that would have been. I guess it could have been a golden eagle or a steppe eagle, something like that.
Yeah.
So it probably does happen, I guess. You know, they're small enough, right, for a big raptor to take. Yeah.
Golden eagle and mountain hawk eagle are very, very powerful in mountain region, and they might kill the kittens of Felis cat or other kittens of small cat, other small cat species. It's possible.
Yeah, and Terry, I think there are records, photos of small snow leopard cubs also being killed by raptors.
Wow.
I think
Okay.
there are some images as well.
So Ganga, a question about the hybridization. Is hybridization a threat for Felis cat, or are they completely?
I don't think so. Yeah. For the case of Felis cat.
Yeah, Felis cat situated in a very unique evolutionary place. It has a unique genus, and there's no co-generic species with Felis cat. So although in some area I heard people say that there's a Felis cat hybrid, but I doubt it will happen. So.
Yeah, I haven't seen any evidence. So yeah.
Too unique. The Felis cat is way too cool to hybrid with others.
And they do coexist, right? You know, I think parts of the plateau, right? There are Felis cats and Chinese mountain cats.
Mountain cat, yes.
Coexisting. And I guess domestic cats obviously increasingly so as well alongside them. But yes, I've never heard of a hybrid. Okay, I think we're probably through all the questions from the participants that I can see. If there are any other questions or questions that I've overlooked, please put them in the chat box. And we can see if, Oh, we have one here. Yeah. Any idea why density would be higher of leopard cat so close to the city than anywhere else?
That's a good question. Yeah, thank you for asking that. So why Beijing? Why? So one reason might be that when because most of other monitoring sites are in the heart of the nature reserve, where there are all this charismatic megafauna. So when there's a charismatic megafauna like leopard, black bear, panda, when there's a big ones, so the competition between different carnivores will, to some extent, suppress the mesa carnivores' presence. When the big, large predators is extinct, that release the space for the mid-sized carnivores. So I think there's all these ecological theories suggesting that. So maybe that's one reason that when Beijing is deprived of leopards and tigers, and there's no other like wolf, like the competing canines, so the leopard cat becomes they have no other strong competitors for the survival. And the second reasons might be really, although we see that Beijing it's a mega city with 20 million people, but in just outside of the city center, all these mountains, all this elevated height of the mountain range actually form a natural barrier to human development and to other disturbance. So where we have our study site, the actual records of human activities are not high, only 40% of a year. So with 60% of the year, the trail has no people walking by. So that essentially bring all the room for and resilient and adaptive species like leopard cat to survive. So, and there's no apparent hunting, trapping, collecting, building, logging. So all these other threats that we often observe in other areas are actually absent from a big city like Beijing. So that actually brings another reason for hope. So the big threat will be this massive, big scale of construction capacity building that can change the landscape. But other than that, so if we maintain the nature hiking, low maintenance nature activities, so there's still a land connectivity and integrity to maintain the certain wildlife assembly. Like leopard cat, they don't require big home range. So for that, Beijing really has a hope. That's right. Yeah, so I think there's two reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about the leopards, the lack of leopards, because I think the leopard population in the mountains to the west of Beijing, right, in Shanxi province, is now thought to be increasing, and there's potential for leopards actually to recolonize Beijing in the future, which will be very interesting, right, for a big capital city to have leopards coming back, and that may, of course, have a negative impact on the leopard cat population.
I think we can live with that.
Yeah, I think we can live with that as well. Yeah, absolutely. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, and there is another question which I failed to spot, which has been kindly highlighted by Raki. There's a question here from Narayan Koju. Maybe Narayan can unmute and give the question directly about the gastrointestinal parasites. A detailed one for you. Narayan?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the questions. So basically, what we found is cats are very clean animals. They love to groom a lot and they lick the furs a lot. So since the animal, what you are doing research, they visit frequently to human habitat, and then potentiality of hybridization is what we are talking right now. So what might be the possibility of the exchanging of exoparasites as well as the gastrointestinal parasites in that area?
Yeah, we're talking about two areas. One in the Tibetan area of the Chinese mountain cat range, and one is in the leopard cat range in a more widespread area of China. So I think a close contact to the domestic cat community will bring an impact to the wild felis population. So I love cats, but I'm always a strong opponent to outdoor domestic cats. I think the domestic cat should have a home, and they should be kept inside the house. They should not go free. So there's so much uncertainty or certainty about their impacts to the wild felis populations. Yeah. So yeah. But right now, there's no study on that. Yeah, so China is it's an opportunity everywhere. Everywhere there's unknown. So much we should learn. We should work on. Yeah.
Ganga, do you have any comments on that, on the parasite question?
We haven't studied the parasites of Felis cat and other small cats yet, but there might, as Narayan says, that might be possibility of exchanging parasites between the domestic cat and other sympatric wildcat like Chinese mountain cat, jungle cat. So it might be possible. This is the interesting topic of research in the future. We should consider about it.
Oh, you have jungle cat. I'm so jealous.
Okay, well, I'm sure we could actually go on for a lot longer, and I'm very tempted to do that. But unfortunately, I know that many people have other commitments to go to, including me. So I think we should draw the discussion to a close. I want to thank, in particular, Dr. Luo for that incredible presentation about both Chinese mountain cat and the leopard cat in Beijing. I think there was so much in there, so many highlights, and so many questions that we had from the participants today. And I think, as I say, we could have gone on a lot longer. And thank you also so much to Ganga for joining us. It's great to have another small cat specialist to join these webinars. I think there's so much interest in small cats as well as big cats. So I hope the Snow Leopard Network can do more to focus on the wider cat family. I think in particular the species that share the habitat at high elevations, I think could be very, very interesting. And thank you everyone for joining. I think we had at least 3 continents joining us. From New Zealand, from Asia, from Europe at least. So really wonderful to see the diversity of people joining in the discussion and the interest in these small cats. As I said at the beginning, this talk and lecture and webinar will be on YouTube. The recording will be there uploaded to the Snow Leopard Network channel. For anyone who missed it or wants to repeat, it will be there as a resource along with all the other Snow Leopard Network webinars that have taken place. So thank you again so much for joining today, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.